Good morning and welcome to the RationalFanz podcast. That is RationalFanz with a Z. I'm joined here by Evan Kruger,
What's happening?
Rhett Koblenz,
Yo.
and Nate Haynes.
Howdy.
We were last here 2 weeks ago because last week we had some technical difficulties,
To say the least.
but nonetheless we are here and our last show was before the MLB playoffs started. So we already in the NLCS, and we haven't talked about any playoffs whatsoever because our last show was giving our predictions. Rhett, I'm going to turn to you. What are some things you've seen this postseason?
Well, the Cubs have arrived. I'll say that. I think that with the youthful talent that the Cubs have, they are going to be an annual force in the NL now. And the Cardinals got to watch their back, and the Cubs might take out the Cardinals in the NL Central, so that's something you got to watch for. Also, the Astros, that other young team, they look good, but they need to work on upgrading their bullpen this offseason. That was really their one downfall. They gave up a couple leads. Actually, they had a lead in every game of that series against the Royals, and they gave it up. Some of them they managed to recover, but those two young teams are what I've definitely noticed the most. Also, the Mets, coming off a 90-plus loss season, getting to the playoffs, now with a 3-0 lead on the Cubs, looking to get to the World Series following a tough season.
In this postseason, we haven't seen the true ace that you see in most postseasons. Last year it was Madison Bumgarner, but it seems like every postseason you have one ace who pitches 3 or 4 games each series and will completely shut down a team and win a team at series, but we haven't seen a pitcher like that.
Yeah, that's something that, like you said, we haven't seen it because I really don't think that there is one, because I think, in my personal opinion, the best pitcher in the entire playoffs this year was Jake Arrieta. He had a monster season. I think that he probably is going to win the NL Cy Young Award, and him or Zach Greinke, it's going to be one of those two. But I think Arrieta, he got roughed up against the Cardinals, and he got roughed up against the Mets. And, I was thinking that he would probably be like the Madison Bumgarner of last year, but he didn't show up like that. And, the Mets, they have a really strong pitching staff, but they, their clear ace is Jacob deGrom, but he's not really that kind of pitcher either, because he can, if he loses a game, they've got Harvey and Noah Syndergaard to back him up and maybe get another game, kind of to make up for the one that deGrom lost. But he's a really good pitcher. He hasn't been dominant, but he's been good for the Mets this season. He's got him to a 3-0 lead.
Like you said, the Mets have 3 or 4 good pitchers. So although you have Matt Harvey and Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom, you won't see them pitching 3 or 4 games a series because they have such a deep rotation. Like during the season, I think they were trying to go to a 6-man rotation. That's how deep they were.
Yeah, they don't need to push one guy to his limits like the Giants did last year with Bumgarner. Bringing him in that World Series game, bringing him into the game on 2 days rest, and he pitched, I believe, 4 innings on 2 days rest. That's just something you don't see, and he was dominant doing it. He didn't show any signs of fatigue, and the Mets really don't have to do that. Matt Harvey's coming off of the Tommy John injury, so they wanted to limit his innings this season and use him for the postseason. But even if he were to go down, I think the Mets would still be okay using that Syndergaard deGrom 1-2 punch. And honestly, at this point, I think that the Mets are going to win the World Series because of their pitching.
Now let's talk about that wild Game 5 in Toronto last Wednesday. You had the crazy off-the-bat live ball play, and then you had Jose Bautista crush a home run, flip his bat, everybody gets mad, and then you have all the fans throwing trash on the field as well.
Oh, I know. The Jays, they were going to protest that call, but when Texas tied the game, they're going to protest the call and blah blah blah. We're gonna go against that. That wasn't the right call. Whatever. Okay, then Jose Bautista comes in and saves you, and then all of a sudden they stop griping. I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to about the Joey bat flip, but he said that's the way Hispanics play. They play with more emotion, and they're more prone to do stuff like that, and that's just natural for them. That's just their way of life, and they're naturally more emotional when they do something well. And we as Americans we're not that way, so we kind of take that the wrong way, and that's kind of why it got escalated. But Jose Batista was just doing what he knows how to do.
I think that it's a lot like running up the score in football, because you hear a lot of people complain, oh, don't run up the score. That's mean. You can't try to put up 50 points on us. If you don't want them to run up the score, then play better defense. And if you don't want Jose Batista flipping his bat like that, then don't give up a home run.
Well, that was a huge play. The game was tied. There were 2 guys on, and that was after Toronto had rallied and won 2 straight games. That was the first home team that won a game at home that series, and so that was a big game for the Blue Jays. And I personally, I'm okay with Jose Batista doing that bat flip because it's the playoffs. You don't get to the playoffs. I mean, for goodness sakes, the Toronto Blue Jays haven't been to the playoffs for 20-some years, and now they get there, and Jose Batista hits a massive home run to give them the lead and eventually the game. And he's going to show his emotion like that, and I'm totally okay with that bat flip.
And then the Blue Jays go on to the ALCS, and they're down 3-1 to the Royals, getting demolished last night, 14-2. They brought in their second baseman to pitch. He had a 90-mile-per-hour fastball. That's quite the arm there for a second baseman.
Yeah, things aren't looking good for the Blue Jays right now. If they want to win this series, they're going to have to beat a really, really good Royals team 3 times in a row. I don't think it can be done. I think maybe if the Blue Jays are lucky, they'll force a Game 7. But, I could see the Royals closing it out next game. So I think it's going to be Royals-Mets World Series and Mets winning it all this year.
I think I'm on that same boat with you. 2 weeks ago, we had our World Series predictions. Let's just go around and see how everybody's World Series prediction is doing.
Meh. Well, I'm halfway there right now because, I had Yankees and the Mets, and the Mets, well, they have a good chance of winning the World Series, so, hey, we'll see.
I believe I said it was going to be a Missouri showdown, but, the Cardinals are out, but like Nate, I could get half of a Missouri showdown, so if you combine my prediction with Nate's prediction, we're going to be right.
Well, I mean, I just said Cardinals, and so I didn't say anything about the AL. I didn't tell you that I thought that the Royals were going to win the AL. I was keeping that one as a surprise, so I'm half right,
That's
too.
That's not a surprise to anybody, though, so.
And I had the Cubs Blue Jays, and they're both losing in their respective series. So
you're wrong.
I'm pretty much wrong. All right, let's turn to college football here. Evan, I'm going to turn to you first. What were some things you liked this weekend in college football?
Things that I liked, well, there wasn't a whole lot. Indiana lost, which was heartbreaking because I thought, all right, they're 4-2. They lost a couple in a row, but, Rutgers stinks, so they're going to win. They were up by 15 going into the fourth quarter, and then they end up losing 55-52. That was an exciting game, but nobody really cares about that. I don't know, Ohio State, they really they just smacked Penn State, which
Finally.
I thought Penn State was going to put up a good fight, but finally Ohio State comes out and shows just a glimpse of how great they were last year in the college football
Might
playoffs.
I add, that was all because of J.T. Barrett. He accounted for 4 touchdowns, I believe, maybe 5. He threw for 2, only on 4 passes, threw 2 touchdowns on 4 passes, and ran for another 2 or 3. Plus, Ezekiel Elliott had a really big game, and, JT got the starting job, which I think is ultimately going to be the best thing for Ohio State because he got him through that whole season last year, until he got hurt against Michigan. But going back to JT, I think is the better choice for Urban Meyer and the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think J.T. Barrett has really earned his the right to start. And another thing that caught my eye was the American Conference. I mean, you see Memphis, they beat a pretty good Ole Miss team. They beat them really well. And, it just didn't even look close. Paxton Lynch, he is a big fella, and he was just chucking it around the field on Ole Miss, making them look really bad. And so I think that Memphis is a team to watch out for. And, that's really what caught my eye.
In the American Conference, you have Memphis, who's 6-0, Houston at 6-0, and Temple at 6-0. You have 3 6-0 teams, and they're going to be battling with Toledo for that final top 6 bowl game spot and the non-Big 5 conferences. Rhett, what were some of your first impressions from college football this week?
Iowa is very, very good at football. Iowa had an amazing week this week against Northwestern. I believe the final score of that game was 40-10. And Iowa, it really started becoming clear how good they were a couple weeks ago when they beat Wisconsin in that 10-6 slugfest. And now they're undefeated, and Iowa is the team that if they have a good chance to win out, and if they win out, you could see an undefeated Big Ten championship matchup either between Michigan State and Iowa or Ohio State and Iowa. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Hawkeyes fare the rest of the season.
Well, it was impressive to see. Kanziri, he went down in the first quarter, and then you bring in your backup running back to rush for like 200 yards, and so he just dominated. And Northwestern, they stink. What happened the last 2 weeks? They've lost by they got shut out against Michigan. They lost 38-10 here, and they've gone from a team that's been really hot to a kind of a disappointment. So
Nate might bring this up, but Michigan, what in the world happened there? Oh my goodness, that's like the craziest end to a game I've ever seen in college football.
Yeah, I was just about to talk about the laughing stock of college football, Michigan Wolverines. Wow, Jim Harbaugh, I think you forgot to recruit a punter. Yeah, I don't really know what that was. Michigan had the game in the bag. There's like 10 seconds left on the clock. All you got to do is punt the ball downfield. Heck, punt it like 20 yards out of bounds.
There's no guy downfield for Michigan State either.
Exactly. And you fumble the punt. Michigan State picks it up, scores a touchdown. Game over. Heartbreak City.
Michigan fan gets made into a meme.
Yeah, that too. Through the whole game, Michigan played pretty well, and they stopped Connor Cook on a lot of those drives, and that's pretty impressive considering how Connor Cook is one of the top-rated quarterbacks in all of college football right now, and just doing that is always pretty impressive. But yeah, that's just heartbreaking for Michigan because if they wanted any shot at the college football playoffs this year, they needed to win this game, and well, that obviously didn't happen. So
Michigan was the laughingstock of the sports world for one day, and then the Colts come out and outshine them.
Hey, we're not to the NFL yet.
we're
Save
not
that for
talking
later.
about that right now, all right? This is not NFL time. It's college football time, all right? We're making fun of Michigan, okay?
Okay, so anyway, another game I wanted to talk about was the Florida at LSU game. Florida came in ranked 8th and LSU was 6th. I thought it was going to be a pretty close game, and at first, through the first quarter and a half, Florida looked pretty dominant, and it looked like they were going to steamroll over LSU and win. But once again, LSU just starts handing the rock off to Leonard Fournette, and he just busts off a bunch of big gains, and LSU ended up winning. And a lot of that too had to do with LSU's quarterback Brandon Harris finally realizing, I can play quarterback. And he had a very nice game against Florida, and Florida has a pretty good secondary with Vernon Hargreaves, so that was a pretty impressive win by LSU.
Leonard Fournette is an absolute monster. To think that he has to come back next season because of NFL draft rules is amazing. He's only a sophomore, 150 rushes, 1,202 yards, 8 yards on average, along with the 14 touchdowns. That's almost a first down every single rush. Like, why don't you just hand the ball off to him every play and you'll win?
I think it'll just be an absolute travesty if he does not win the Heisman Trophy. He has been that dominant.
Well, none of us would remember this because we weren't even alive when this happened, but Peyton Manning was putting up these kind of numbers when he was, I believe the 97-98 season. He was putting up this kind of numbers. Halfway through the season, everybody's like, he's the Heisman favorite. Well, then he ends up having a bad second half, and Charles Woodson picks him off. That was his first pick of Peyton Manning.
Wait, was Peyton Manning passing or rushing?
What do you think, Nate?
Rushing.
Wrong. No, he was putting up passing numbers like that. I should have clarified that. But he's putting up passing numbers like that, and everybody says, he's going to win the Heisman. Well, he decides to stop producing like that season, and then Charles Woodson gets an elusive interception of Peyton Manning. He steals the Heisman straight from him.
With Leonard Fournette, you bring into question, does he play next year? You know, the Nick Chubb, Marcus Lattimore type injury could just absolutely destroy his career. So does he sit out, rest himself for the NFL? Or does he get back on the field, show NFL scouts more of what he has?
Yeah, that's always a huge question for these college athletes who, have the potential to, or, have several $1 million on the line. I think we also, too, have to remember the Jadeveon Clowney situation. He didn't sit out that last year. He was at South Carolina, but he basically kind of took it off. I have a hamstring injury or whatever it was. I'm going to sit out for half the season, hey, look, I get picked number 1 overall, but then I'm hurt all the time in the NFL because my conditioning stinks and I'm lazy.
Lighten his workload, but don't take him out. I think if you absolutely need to, ride him in games, but I think you should lighten his workload. But that's the thing, whether Fournette decides to, I don't know, I would almost say that it's selfish for him to, request a lighter workload and, kind of think of himself rather than the good of LSU. But, I don't want to see him get hurt. So it's just a tough situation that LSU is going to be in.
Nobody wants to see him get hurt, but, if he will have to come back, and he will have to be a student athlete again, and I think that as a student athlete, the most important thing for you to do is put your team number 1. I think that just thinking about you and your future would be a little bit selfish. But then again, when you see people like Marcus Lattimore with his kneecap on the other side of his knee and Nick Chubb with his leg bending away that nobody's leg should, that's kind of scary, but that's the danger of football. And it could happen, off-season conditioning. You could injure yourself anytime, I'm sure we've seen. So I think that if he does come back, he will get a lighter workload, but not so light that he's a Jadeveon Clowney type where he kind of just loses his edge, really.
Let's turn to the Notre Dame USC game. USC, without their coach, they turn to their interim coach. They go into Notre Dame, and they don't get blown out like many people thought they would.
Just about knocked him off, actually.
It was actually pretty close. The scoreboard doesn't tell you the whole story of the game.
Yeah, Notre Dame, they struggled early on, and, it always seems like Notre Dame pulls out those close wins, luck of the Irish. But, that was a pretty impressive showing, in my opinion, for all the, all just the challenges that USC has gone through this season. That was a pretty impressive performance for them. So I wouldn't hang your head if I were USC.
USC is a hot mess right now. Quite honestly, everybody was picking them to be really, really good, win the Pac-12, be in the college football playoff. Well, now they're 3-3, and they got to win some games if they want to get into a bowl. They've got a huge game this week against Utah, which they're actually favored to win. I'm not sure how that works, I don't understand. But Utah is the underdog in that game. I don't think they really are. I don't know, but they have a huge game, and I think if they can knock off Utah, then that's a huge step in the right direction for USC. And then they've got a game against Cal. But, USC needs to get their program turned around if they want to end up in a bowl game this season. But, yeah, like you said, they had a good show against Notre Dame, and they just about beat them in that one.
I had picked USC to be in the college football playoffs, and that obviously isn't going to happen. That was a horrible pick.
If they played in the SEC, they would still have a chance to get in, but they don't.
If they played in the Big Ten, they'd still have a chance to get in, but they don't.
Play on the Iowa side of the Big Ten,
yeah,
where you have Iowa, Wisconsin, Purdue, and that's about it.
Purdue's not even good.
They're awful. I think one last thing we need to talk about here is how ridiculous is Baylor's offense.
Oh, my God.
They hang 60 points plus every single game on every single team that they play. It's just ridiculous. It looks like Madden out there. They score so many points. Their offense is so efficient. It looks like they could beat anybody, but I know that they have that matchup with TCU coming up, which is a lot like the Ohio State-Michigan State game. So that's going to really show us what these teams are made of. But until then, I think Baylor is one of the best teams in college football.
I'm predicting 101-100 TCU wins.
You probably are not wrong.
I could see that happening.
Baylor's lowest scoring point total was 56 against SMU out of all teams. SMU.
Well, Baylor's quarterback, Seth Russell, his stat line for this week, 20 for 33, 380 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 14 carries for 160 yards and 1 touchdown. That's like a down week for him. That's just amazing to think about. It's just amazing how high-powered Baylor's offense is. Even like 5 years ago, we didn't see anything like this, and all of a sudden we have all these teams in college football who just explode and score like at least 50 points a game. It's amazing.
We thought with Bryce Petty gone, Baylor wouldn't be so good, but come to find out, Seth Russell is probably better than Bryce Petty, putting up 1,907 yards, a 27-5 touchdown interception ratio, and a quarterback rating of 210 on the season.
Oh my goodness.
210. That is just absolutely ridiculous.
How, there are some teams this season that we haven't seen in a while. They haven't been good, like Toledo. They're in the top 25 now. And might I add, they smoked Eastern Michigan, who LSU struggled with. I believe that was last week. But, Toledo's one of those teams that they came out of nowhere and all of a sudden they're in the top 25. And, you've got a couple other teams like that from the MAC. We should see some pretty good things coming up this week. Maybe some shakeups in the rankings. But, college football is going good. It's been a good season so far, and I'm excited to watch the last few weeks.
This season is one of the more unpredictable seasons throughout the past decade. You don't know who's going to win on any given Saturday. Like a lot of years you have like your Alabama, they're going to win this Saturday. Or your Ohio State, they're going to win. But even Ohio State going in, playing on a Saturday, they could lose. You have to watch every game.
I believe this is the week that we start seeing college football playoff rankings. After this week, I believe, is when they start putting them out. But, I think, in my opinion, those rankings are going to be a lot different than the AP poll. And we have to, the ones that really matter now are the college football playoff because that's which teams get in. And, they're going to be a lot different than the AP poll, I think. But it's going to be interesting to see how each team fares. Earlier this week on the Paul Feinbaum show, I can't remember who it was. Whoever his guest was it was Joey Galloway, said that whoever the SEC champion is going to get into the college football playoff. And I would disagree with that statement because, what if you've got a 2-loss team or even a 1-loss team coming from the SEC and you've got a 1-loss TCU and a 1-loss Baylor who have both exploded this season. And, what about that? I just don't think that the SEC is as good as they have been. I mean, they're still good, don't get me wrong. But, they're more balanced and spread out. So, really, at any moment, anyone could ruin another team's season. So, I just think it's going to be different than last year.
I think you're right on the college football rankings being completely different than the AP rankings because the college football rankings are completely on the eye test. There's really no computers. I mean, if some computer guy wants to bring in his stats computer and rank his teams, that's only like one of the 15 votes. It's just all on the eye test. So like a team like Ohio State, they haven't dominated their opponents like you would assume they would, but so they're probably not going to be the number one team like maybe Baylor or Utah might be.
Well, I mean, with the AP poll, a lot of it that goes into the next week's AP poll is where teams were last week. And so it just seems odd. All right, we don't want to drop Ohio State 4 spots or something like that, so they keep them at number 1. With the college football rankings, I mean, they're just starting out fresh. They're just saying, all right, here's our list of who we think the top 25 teams are just right now. And so, yeah, they will be pretty different.
All right, we're going to turn to top games of this upcoming week. Evan, I'm going to turn to you first. What is a key game this week?
Well, I think really there's only one matchup, as far as I know, between ranked teams, and that's on between two teams that are on the decline. Texas A&M, who just got whooped by Alabama, and then Ole Miss, who's been embarrassed 2 weeks in a row. I think we can kind of write off at this point. But other than that, Tennessee, Alabama. Tennessee can be tricky sometimes. They're not very good, but sometimes they show glimpses of being an above-average team, so they could give Alabama some trouble. Beyond that, there's not too many high-profile matchups, really.
That Texas A&M Ole Miss game is the only game between two ranked teams, so there isn't much on the plate for college football this weekend. Rhett, a key game for you this week?
Well, I still think that the Florida State Georgia Tech game is still going to be it's going to be key. Georgia Tech has had an extremely disappointing season. They're 2-5 right now. But Georgia Tech, they're still going to put up a fight against Florida State. And, Florida State's been really, really quiet this year. We haven't really talked about them much. But Georgia Tech could put them out of playoff contention. At any moment, Georgia Tech's offense could just explode. So I think that's going to be a game to watch, even though it is a 6-0 team versus a 2-5 team.
Georgia Tech is 2-5. That's
They've
very
lost
surprising.
5 in a row. Like, they were like 17th. Remember, saw them lost to Notre Dame, and I thought, wow, this is a pretty good team still. But then they go and they lose 4 more in a row.
I thought they were a lot better than that. That's surprising. They were ranked not too long ago, and now they're on the verge of losing their bowl bid. 2 more losses, and they're done.
I think another surprising thing is how Everett Golson has really reinvented himself at Florida State. I mean, the one thing that we haven't seen out of him this year is turnovers. That killed Notre Dame last year. That's what lost him those 4 or 5 games in a row that kind of took him out of major bowl game contention. But this year he's really cleaned up his act, and he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC.
0 interceptions on the season.
That's impressive out of a recovering turnover holic. So
his rushing total -21 yards on the season. I don't think he should be running the ball.
Those are most likely they probably count sacks into that too. So it's probably a balance, but yeah, he should just throw the ball.
College game day this week is at James Madison University for the James Madison and Richmond FCS showdown between the 2 undefeated teams. That just shows you how little there is.
That's an awful week of football.
I mean, even they understand that Texas A&M Ole Miss isn't just a bad high-profile. Well, I'm making quotations, high-profile game. So it's kind of sad.
It is a top game in the FCS, though. Both of them are undefeated, and both of them are ranked pretty high in the FCS poll.
Well, it's bad when your Saturday night football game is number 1 Ohio State versus unranked Rutgers. We all know we all expect how that game is going to go. It could go differently, but when Ohio State is playing Rutgers on the Saturday night, that's not a very good week for college football.
We're going to turn to the NFL here. Nate, what were some of your first thoughts from this week's game?
Well, hey, I'm going to start off with the Thursday night game, Falcons and Saints. This whole entire season, the Saints have just looked bad, and with all these rumors going around about how Drew Brees is playing with an injured whatever in his shoulder. The Saints, they came out and they kind of clobbered the Falcons. That block punt was pretty cool to see, the Saints, they just brought an energy to their game, that we haven't seen all season, and I still think it's kind of too late now for the Saints. They're 2-4, and they still lack a lot of talent and depth on offense and especially defense. But they really lived off of the Falcons' turnovers that night, and but Devonta Freeman still had a pretty big night, which is impressive.
If the Falcons want to do anything this season, they can't fall into those deep fourth-quarter holes. The past couple games, they've climbed themselves back out of those fourth-quarter holes. But the Saints game, the Saints stepped it up on defense and just shut them down.
Well, this year's Falcons kind of remind me of the Colts of a couple years ago when Andrew Luck was in his second year, and he had so many fourth quarter comebacks that year, his sophomore year, so to speak, because their defense kept putting him in holes, and he would always find a way to climb out. And they went 11-5, and then they did it again in the wild card. It just wore him out, and they ended up getting smacked by the Patriots in the divisional round. And that's no way to play a season. That's it really takes a toll on your team when you have to do that every single week like the Falcons have.
All right, Evan, I know you like to have this segment. Maybe you don't. I'm not really sure. But the Colts suck.
All right, so let's analyze what happened. I know we have to talk about it. Chuck Pagano's brainchild, that awful, horrible, no good, very bad, fake punt, whatever you want to call it.
It was the wrong center on that play, is what Pat McAfee said.
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, you have your kick returner / wide receiver / practice squad player snapping the ball, your safety. I mean, Pagano, he said after the game, he wasn't supposed to snap it. You're the idiot that lined him up in the worst formation of all time. What were you expecting to happen? Do you really think you're going to catch the most prepared team in the NFL off guard? You think they're going to say, they're in a stupid, dumb formation. Let's send out 3 more players on the field. Let's have 15 guys on the field. I mean, come on. What did you think was going to happen? Punt the ball. Your defense is doing all right, I guess. Don't give them the ball on the 38-yard line and embarrass yourself. I mean, the Colts, completely overshadowed everything else that happened in that game. Andrew Luck had a really good game coming off of an injury. He had a good game. They played well. They had the lead in the first half, but that's all been overshadowed because of the worst play calling in history. I mean, now they're going to be the butt of every joke for the next 2 weeks, and they're going to be at the top. They're going to be the worst of the worst on the SportsCenter not top 10 for the next 2 years, like the butt fumble. I mean, this is just embarrassing. And I mean, now the Colts are 3-3. They had won 3 in a row. It kind of took the air out of the stadium, really, when you saw that happen. And now they have to play the Saints coming off of a win. And I don't know if they can do it, because I mean, if Drew Brees plays as well as he did against the Falcons, then I don't think the Colts are even going to win next week. God bless the AFC South, because everybody else is 1-5, 2-4. I mean, the Titans can't get their quarterback protection situation figured out. Blake Bortles still throws too many interceptions, and the Texans still stink. I mean, their quarterbacks, they're still not good. I mean, they beat the Jaguars last week, but that's what kind of a consolation is that? So
the Colts have done that.
All things considered, that was. I'm out of things to say.
I don't have any comments. I'm too sore about that.
Could this be the year we have 2 7-9 teams make the playoffs? With that being the Colts at 7-9, and the rest of the AFC South.
The Colts will probably be 10-6.
But then you also get the winner of the NFC East to be 7-9 because they beat each other up. Because Eagles are good half the time, Giants are good half the time, and the Cowboys lose a bunch of games before Romo comes back. And they find themselves at 7-9. Could be unpredictable.
Yeah, yeah. The NFC least, the Eagles, they look pretty good against the Giants, but then again, it's just the Giants, they just don't look like a dominant team like we thought they were going to be. But back to the whole 7-9 situation. I think it's always interesting to see these teams with bad records, I guess, win their division and go on to the playoffs, because usually, they fare kind of well. In the past few years, they go into, I don't know, some other team with a wild card, like let's say like Green Bay or something. Let's say Green Bay wins or their record's like 11-5 or something. Obviously not this year because it's going to be better than that. But let's say that they go into Lambeau with 11-5, the Packers have an 11-5 record, and like the Eagles go in there with like a 7-9 record or something. And the team with the better record, they usually play like we're the best thing in the world. There's no way this other team's gonna beat us, and it usually actually ends up being a pretty good game. I always think of Beastquake a few years ago with when the Saints were at Seattle. That was a fun game to watch, and Breeze. he had a really good year that year, except for that playoff game, and that was pretty fun to see.
It happened last year too. Carolina Panthers 7-9. They take on the Cardinals in Carolina. Cardinals were 11-5 that season, although they were on their third string quarterback.
Well, they didn't have an offense, so that was to be expected. I don't think the Panthers were quite as bad towards the end of the season as the record showed. But even still, 7-8-1. That's kind of not what you want to see in the playoffs. But, it is what it is. And so, with these divisions going up and down, it happens every once in a while, but it's by no means the norm. I don't think that the Colts are going to have a losing record this year. They're going to win the AFC South. They're going to be at least 9-7. So,
Sam Bradford, though, 3 interceptions against that horrible Giants defense. You go up against even an average defense, and what, are you going to throw 5 interceptions?
Yeah, Sam Bradford, I don't know what's wrong with that guy. When he came out of Oklahoma, statistically, he was one of the most accurate college quarterbacks of all time. And, that's why he was the number 1 overall pick with the Rams. Several years later, with all these injuries and, the setbacks and stuff, Sam Bradford still struggles. When I watch him play, his game basically consists of either, 1, handing off to DeMarco Murray for a negative 4-yard gain, or 2, passing down the field for like 11 yards each time and somehow getting a first down, or 3, throwing an interception.
All right, Ray, I know you had something to say. Maybe not.
Phillip Rivers, 500 yards, but only 2 touchdowns, and they still lost. I don't understand how that happens. 500 yards, that's huge. That's that's half of 1,000 yards right there. You just got it's considered good if you throw for 4,000 yards in a season, and you just got an eighth of that in one game.
Well, we saw that with Carson Palmer too. The Cardinals stunk it up, but he somehow threw for 400 yards against a Steelers team with their third string quarterback, and they lost by double digits, which is kind of surprising because, I don't know, the Cardinals have been one of the best teams this year at times, but then now they have another game they shouldn't have lost that they did, so it's kind of hard to figure them out.
Going back to Phillip Rivers, and then we can turn back to the Cardinals game. Phillip Rivers, 43 completions on 65 attempts, NFL record completions, but who would have known that you need 1 more completion to even send the game into overtime?
Yeah, with that goal line stance, at the end of the game, I really don't understand what the Chargers were thinking. They basically tore up the Packers defense the whole time. You decided to run it like two times, that doesn't make any sense to me. You got to keep passing the ball. You got to go with what's working. To quote Mike Ditka, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Chargers didn't follow that rule, so they lost.
All right, let's turn to the NFL refs. NFL refs have been pretty bad this season. The Bears game, the Golden Tate touchdown, what was that all about? It was in the Bears guys' hands.
Well, this is a tricky play because you have to remember, with a runner, as soon as the ball touches the plane of the goal line, the play is over. It doesn't matter what happens after that. So it's not about, really, if he did become a runner, it's not about, did he keep the ball in the end zone? That doesn't matter. Yeah, it came out of his hands in the end zone, but what they were looking at is, did he become a runner? I think he caught the ball on the half-yard line, and he turned into the end zone, so that's a touchdown, and I think that's what they saw.
Yeah, it may or may not be a touchdown, but the thing that frustrates me the most is that it took the referees at least 10 minutes to review that play. Fans in the stadium, they don't want to pay for that crap, The tickets are expensive, and it's just frustrating as a fan, watching these refs, blunder all these calls and, all these bad flags and stuff, it's not fun to watch. It kind of ruins football.
My complaint is, you call it an interception. I didn't see enough video evidence there to overturn it. I could see if you called it a touchdown in the first place, keep it a touchdown. But I just didn't think there was enough video evidence to overturn that touchdown.
Well, I mean, just the entire debate, catch, not a catch. We've seen so many plays. Calvin Johnson, when he threw the ball down in the end zone, and they called it not a touchdown. Des Bryant, who didn't quite complete the process of the catch, but maybe did, but probably didn't. I don't think Des caught it, but that's probably because I hate the Cowboys. But and then you see another play, and people always say, "Oh, you have to make it clear." But it's so ambiguous with these plays. I mean, are you going to say that they only have to have it in their hands for, half a second, and then it's a catch? I think the rule is right now is as good as it's going to get. I think you still have to complete the process. Yeah, people don't like it. Yeah, sometimes teams end up getting screwed because of this rule. But in the end, what are you going to do? It's a tough play to call. It's really ambiguous, and it's just hard because really, these are the refs. They're the best in the world at what they do, but sometimes you have to scratch your head at that because they still make dumb calls and whatnot. But even still, because the game is played at such a fast pace, it's hard to account for human error.
You know, I would almost disagree with you in the fact that it's about as good as it's going to get. It's as clear as mud. You know, the fact. Well, what exactly does he have to do? Does he have to have possession? Does he have to control the ball? Does he have to keep it off the ground? You know, it can be kind of confusing as a fan watching because to me, you know, you see calls that almost contradict each other. You know, between the Des Bryant call and this call and other calls that we've seen, we almost see them contradict each other. So I think that the one thing that the NFL really needs to focus on fixing is the catching rule and make it really clear and make sure that it's a uniform standard across the entire league.
Yeah, you know, I think, let's see, Bill Belichick a few weeks ago, he was talking to the media, or, you know, just talking in general about how how NFL coaches and teams need to have the ability to challenge anything on the field, whether that be a flag, a call, a first down, spot of the ball, whatever. They should be able to challenge everything. And no ifs, ands, or buts. And, you know, I agree with him because if the refs are going to continue to blow these calls and, you know, have misunderstandings of the rules or whatever Roger Goodell's excuse is, you know, I really think that might be a good solution. And maybe you give them an extra challenge. I don't know about that, but I think that might be a good solution.
Well, I mean, some of the plays where you hear the announcer saying, "Oh wait, this isn't challengeable," they can't review it, and you scratch your head because you look back and it's so clear that either the call should be reversed or the call was wrong. Like Fail Mary. I mean, all you had to do was look at the replay once to see that the Packers safety had the interception in his hands before Golden Tate got the ball. And so, I don't know, I think it would be a good idea to be able to challenge anything. And until it really starts to encumber the game a lot, I think that they should institute that rule, a universal challenge.
I agree with challenges on penalties because, like with 12 men on the field, you have a guy stepping off the field. And if he's off the field and the refs still throw the flag because they thought he was on the field, you shouldn't be penalized for having your guy off the field.
Yeah, you know, and you know, I think another thing that would really come in handy with the whole, you know, challenge. You have the ability to challenge anything is roughing the passer. You know, there are some really bad calls that go on pretty much every week, you know, and a lot of times, well, I hate to say it, but we see a lot of NBA players out there and quarterbacks, you know, they flop all over the place. You know, defensive tackle barely taps him on the chest and, you know, boom, oh, he just lands on his butt, oh, whines to the ref, oh, give me a flag, gets the flag, first down. That should be able to be challenged. And quite honestly, I think the quarterback should be fined for flopping. Yeah, you know, it's just, it ruins the integrity of the sport, you know, it's kind of cheating.
We're almost in a day and age where the quarterbacks wear dresses and you have to pull the flag out of their belt in order to take them down. And it's definitely not a good situation for defensive linemen, because there's definitely a fine line, and it depends on which reffing crew you get, really. You know, you could do one thing with one ref and not get called for it, do the same thing with another ref and get a flag and 15 yards against you. So, you know, there's definitely a point where it becomes ridiculous that they're calling it, but at the same time, you want to protect the quarterbacks who are the most important players on each team.
Well, I mean, the rule was instituted to protect the quarterback, not to help the offense. I mean, it's not supposed to be some cash cow where you can think, all right, I just threw an incompletion, but if I go and I run into the defensive tackle and fall on my butt, I can get us 15 yards and a first down. So we absolutely need to be able to challenge that kind of play, because things like that and pass interference, which I think the only thing you can review about pass interference is whether or not the ball was tipped at the line of scrimmage. Other than that, you can't review it. Pass interference is the number one call that I think refs get wrong that causes a lot of controversy. So I think that is something that needs to be challengeable too.
I agree on the pass interference. There is one more game this week that had some major implications. I know you guys don't like to talk about it because I'm a Panthers fan. Carolina versus Seattle. Carolina's 5-0, now has a 10-game regular season winning streak, longest in the NFL. They're looking pretty good this season.
Yeah, the Panthers, before the Seahawks game, their schedule is pretty easy. Let's be honest. But the Seahawks are down this year. But I will say this: it's pretty impressive going into Seattle and beating the Seahawks. Because the Seahawks record at home is ridiculous in the past 3 years or whatever it's been. They've only lost 1 or 2 games up there, and kudos to the Panthers. Especially that was a pretty impressive, last minute touchdown drive by the Panthers offense. That Cam Newton, he's been looking pretty good this year. Is he an MVP candidate? I don't know about that. I think Brady and Rodgers are putting up better numbers than Newton, but Newton has looked better than I thought he would this year.
Cam Newton went 7 for 7 on the final drive, led them down the field in 2 minutes and 26 seconds, if I'm correct, and found a wide open Greg Olsen in the end zone. Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor were looking at each other like, who had Greg Olsen in the end zone?
So much for the Legion of Boom. I will say this: the Carolina Panthers, they have done more with less talent than anyone in the NFL. Because beyond Greg Olsen, I can't name anybody that catches passes for the Panthers. And, I think the Panthers, they might be in a bit of trouble this week because the Eagles have been pretty good at covering tight ends. So Cam Newton might have to throw to somebody that's not Greg Olsen. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that it's time we start taking the Panthers seriously. Right now, I think they're the best in the NFC South, that's for sure. And I think that they could be a team to watch for a possible Super Bowl run. I don't know. It might be too early to tell now because I'd like to see them play 1 or 2 more quality opponents. But right now, I think they are a serious competitor.
I'm surprised you can't name another Panthers receivers. All the time I talk about him.
Ted Ginn Jr.
I zone you out when you start talking about the Panthers. That's why I don't know any other players other than Cam Newton and Greg Olsen. Oh, Jonathan Stewart. He's on my fantasy team.
Quick note: did you know Ted Ginn Jr. has his own app?
No way.
It's like NFL kick. Yeah.
Kickoff return something.
I didn't know that they gave average kick returners apps these days. Maybe I can get my own app.
I think what's impressive too with the Panthers is they're missing their quarterback on the defense, Luke Kuechly. He's been out 4 or 5 weeks now with that concussion. Hopefully he's okay and he eventually returns. But the Panthers defense has also been pretty darn good, like they have been the past couple of years.
Josh Norman is an emerging top cornerback. Russell Wilson didn't throw to him at all this week. That could have been a reason as to why the Panthers defense didn't get any interceptions.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot now when a defense has a player that's hot, like Josh Norman is right now. They're playing really well. The offense sometimes just avoids them entirely, because when you go towards that player, you're risking a turnover almost every down. And the Panthers are very fortunate to have Josh Norman emerge like this.
let's turn to next week's upcoming games. I'll start off with Philadelphia and Carolina. Carolina at home against Philadelphia. Carolina never does good on primetime games. I believe they lost to Philadelphia last year 37-10. This is a completely different Carolina team, though. I was reading the CBS Sports predictions, and they wrote like 3 paragraphs on why the Panthers would lose. They Eagles covered the tight end really well, but then like in one sentence, he summed up why the Panthers would win. Sam Bradford is just a hot interception machine, and that's why the Panthers would win, and he predicted the Panthers to win. So if Sam Bradford throws to Josh Norman, Josh Norman will have a night. Evan, what is a big game for you this week?
Well, let's look at the Thursday night matchup. Seahawks 49ers. Like 2 years ago, this was the game. Twice a year, this was the game to watch because it was the two NFL powerhouses duking it out to see who would be the king of the best conference or the best division, the NFC West. But now it's 2-4 teams trying to save their season. Colin Kaepernick, he had a good week last week, surprisingly, against the Ravens, who are well below average. And the Seahawks, they're coming off of that heartbreaking loss against the Panthers. They just can't stop blowing fourth quarter leads. That's kind of alarming. Other than that, there's not too many huge games. I think Colts Saints is a big game for the Colts, really, because I don't know, their season, it's kind of hanging in the balance right now. They kind of need to grab the bull by the horns here and get a win, kind of stabilize things after the play.
Rhett, what is a big game for you this week?
I think that there really aren't any huge games this week. It's kind of a down week for football, honestly. But, most important this week, I think, is Jets-Patriots. Never would have thought that I'd be saying the Jets-Patriots game is an important matchup because if the Jets can somehow find a way to win that game, excuse me, they're going to have the same record as the Patriots, and they'd have a one-up on them in the division. And so the Jets need this win if they want to keep up with the Patriots and maybe unthrone them from that AFC East championship spot.
Yeah, the Jets, they're 4-1. They have a winning record. When was the last time that happened? But the Jets are a defensive team. That's how they win games, on defense, and we're finding that more and more in the NFL. That defense really comes in handy, and Ryan Fitzpatrick has actually been doing all right. Passing to Brandon Marshall and handing off to Chris Ivory this season. That tandem is, it's been working for him. And, when you got something that's working, you just keep going with it, and that defense is going to hold that team up. And, yeah, I think they're going to challenge the Patriots this week.
My question is, if Geno Smith pays back his fine and he doesn't get punched in the face, do you have the same 4-1 Jets team?
Absolutely not.
Or do you have like a 2-3, 1-4 Jets team?
Oh, yeah.
0-5 Jets team.
Yeah, well, Geno Smith, he's a turnover machine, and if you had him in there instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Jets would be awful because the defense would be on the field way too much. But at least now with Ryan Fitzpatrick, they can get the ball going and give the defense some rest on the sidelines.
The thing to fear with the Jets, though, is that Ryan Fitzpatrick can relapse at any moment. And we've seen in the past he has been a turnover machine. He can relapse into being the awful quarterback that we saw, say, last year in Houston. And so right now, I think the Jets are playing well. Just hopefully Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't screw things up.
Just a couple closing questions before we leave. Why does the NFL send all the bad games off to London? This week, you have the Bills and Jaguars. Next week, you have the Lions and Chiefs. If the NFL wants to implement some sort of football in London, why are you sending them the bad teams and showing them, oh, this is how we play football every Sunday, the Bills and Jaguars?
Well, I think in London, a lot of the so-called football fans over there, American football fans, over there. You know, they kind of just want to watch anything, and you know they'll just throw on like a random NFL jersey, like some Tim Tebow jersey to like the Lions Chiefs game. You know, they're just football hungry. You know, and I don't know. I mean it. Well, we're obvious if the bad games are in the United States, you know, no one's gonna watch them. So I guess if you throw them over to London, you know, you'll get some viewers, I guess. So
I wouldn't say throw soccer over here, but we already do. So they should give us rugby. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also teams like the Packers and the Patriots don't want to give up a home game to go play in London. And so you got the teams like the Jaguars that have to cover their seats with blankets to make it look like they actually sold some tickets. They don't really have a choice but to go over to London to play. So,
like you said, Nate, the London fans just throw on any jersey they can find. The Jets-Dolphins game, there was like I saw a picture. There were like 14 different team jerseys on in one picture.
I mean, you know, it's good that we're starting to get, you know, other nations around the world, you know, like London, like, you know, just Europe in general, I guess. You know, some of the countries over there are getting more interested in American football. But, you know, I also think that's kind of overblown by Roger Goodell and his committee. Like, oh, you know, Europe's so interested in American football. But come on, let's be honest. Soccer is way more. It's the most popular sport in the world, you know, and except in the United States. You know, the United States is the exception, and we don't talk about soccer because we're in the United States. So
we almost make them like football, and we're like, hey, we love it, so you're going to love it too. Well, no, that's not how this works, and we force it on them where they might not really want it, so we're kind of giving them almost an unwanted gift.
well, I mean, the NFL just wants to put up this image like, oh, look how worldly and statesman-like we are. How we got football China, we got all these projects and stuff going on across the world. You're a football league. I mean, I think they kind of overblow the popularity of football. I think they kind of overestimate it. I mean, it's huge in America, which is the most important thing, but I don't know. It's just not that big, even in London.
Yeah.
It's just something else for them to watch there.
Got one final question before we leave. This one is a fantasy question. Do you try and trade for some of those struggling stars like a Eddie Lacy, Randall Cobb, Marshawn Lynch type player? Because you can buy them for cheap, and maybe they'd be good. And especially in Eddie Lacy's case, Eddie Lacy started off the season last year really bad and picked it up late season. But do you trade for him?
Hey, no, I think the number one thing you got to do is look at the player's current injury report. You know, if they have something where they're going to be out for a few weeks, you know, they might struggle coming back. And also, you know, if they have a hamstring injury, those things just hang around forever. You know, with Marshawn Lynch, it seems to be on and off for him. You know, one week, oh, you know, he's fine, rushes for 100 yards. The next week, oh, he's out. And that's the one thing you got to look at. Another thing you got to look at is what the team's actually doing offensively. You know, are they at least trying to feed the ball to, you know, for instance, Eddie Lacy? In Eddie Lacy's case, not so much right now. You know, they keep passing the ball around, and you know, I'd be very wary of that.
You've got Aaron Rodgers, so obviously you're going to throw the ball.
Yeah, obviously you're going to throw the ball with Aaron Rodgers, and yeah, so that's just one thing you have to look at. And you know, the third thing you have to look at is, you know, what kind of protection schemes going on. You know, is their offensive line good or bad? If it's good, there's probably a good chance that they're going to pick it up eventually. But if it's bad, then, you know, they're probably going to struggle.
Well, I'd say go ahead and trade for him. Just make sure that you don't sell out to get him, because, I mean, just because they were great last year doesn't mean that they're really going to turn it around. Because, I mean, in the case of, say, Randall Cobb, he had a 3-touchdown game this year, right?
I believe he did, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a case of who Aaron Rodgers feels like throwing to with him. With, like, Eddie Lacy, I wouldn't try to get him because James Starks, he's really stolen the show in Green Bay, really. And plus, I mean, yeah, when you have Aaron Rodgers, you're going to want to throw the ball 40 times a game. And so, I don't know, it just depends on the player, situation to situation.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with Evan. It's like it's really just situation to situation, team to team. Depends on what you've got, really. But, you know, I would be more prone to trade for one of those struggling guys in the hopes that he, kind of picks it up. Because, we could see any guy really turn it on at any moment. Like last year, we saw C.J. Anderson turn it on really big at the end of the year, and he had a huge end of the season last year and became, a real target for fantasy owners, and now he's back down. But we could see anything like that where a struggling guy picks it up again, and all of a sudden he's a really hot item, and you made what seemed like a boneheaded trade for him early in the season, but now it turns out that you're a genius.
I think I've sent out a trade for Eddie Lacy in every single one of my leagues, including our league where I tried to get him Lamar Miller and John Brown. I'm not sure why he's not biting on that trade, but
so you would say yes, trade for Eddie Lacy.
I'm trading for Eddie Lacy. That is this week's show. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.